Muito boa tarde a todos. Bem-vindos a esta tarde de Feira do Livro. É sempre um prazer voltar a esta edição. Este debate é promovido pela Universidade Católica Editora e estamos neste momento a lançar um livro, um recente livro sobre a comunidade judaica em Portugal, e achámos que era interessante trazer também este debate à Feira do Livro. O livro é em inglês, porque o autor é americano, é o Joshua Noel Azriel. Joshua, welcome to Portugal, and so nice to be here with you. Joshua is also, Joshua é professor na Faculdade de Ciências Humanas da Universidade Católica, e com ele temos o professor André Falcão, que também agradeço ter aceito o convite e estar aqui connosco na feira. É presidente da Sinagoga Ohel Jacob, em Lisboa, e professor associado da Faculdade de Ciências da Universidade de Lisboa. Portanto, vão estar ambos em conversa sobre este tema e sobre este livro. E para moderar este debate, não podíamos estar com melhor companhia, senão com a do nosso Vice-Reitor, professor Peter Hanenberg, que é Vice-Reitor para a Investigação e Educação Doutoral na Universidade Católica. Portanto, bem-vindos, e passo então a palavra ao professor Peter. Muito obrigada.
Boa tarde a todos, também bem-vindos da minha parte. É um prazer estar aqui e promover este debate que espero ser interessante e elucidador da situação dos judeus em Portugal e da renovação da presença judaica em Portugal. Eu fiquei muito entusiasmado quando o Jorge me apresentou a ideia de escrever este livro e de promover toda uma investigação à volta deste tema. E assim já estamos em contacto há 2 anos ou mais para concretizar este projeto, e hoje é o dia para lançar isso a todos e à comunidade em geral. Como o autor fala melhor inglês do que português e como o livro também é escrito em inglês, se calhar permitam-nos falar em inglês em vez de falar português, apesar de estarmos na Feira do Livro de Lisboa, onde também se encontra uma festa da língua portuguesa, e assim que é bom também. But now coming to the English version of all it, Joshua, I was saying that I'm very pleased that we met. I'm very pleased that we talked so many months and even years in the meanwhile about this project, and that we finally got to the point to have the book out. It has been really a pleasure to work with you and to see how you engage in this project, which is a book project, but also a project of research. And that's where my first question starts. And the first question is, why did you get interested in Portugal as a place where Jews live and like to live?
Peço desculpa, ainda estou aprendendo português. Obrigado por terem vindo à palestra de hoje. Gostaria de agradecer à Universidade Católica de Lisboa por ter acolhido este evento. Agradecer ao editor de UCP, Peter Hanenberg, por me encorajar durante todo este processo. E agradecer a André Israel Falcão por ter conversado comigo hoje sobre meu livro. Nos últimos 4 anos, viajei muito em Portugal para pesquisar e escrever este livro. Renovação Judaica em Portugal, Identidade, Memória e Retorno. Em inglês. Thank you. Thank you for attending today's lecture. I want to thank first the Catholic University of Lisbon for hosting this event. I want to thank you, Peter for encouraging me throughout this process. I want to thank you, André Azriel, for speaking with me today about my book. And over the past 4 years, I traveled extensively throughout Portugal to research and write this book, Jewish Renewal in Portugal, Identity, Memory, and Return. And now I'm going to start to answer your question. So you were asking me, why was I interested in Portugal and the Jewish community? And it's for a lot of reasons. And to begin with, there are a lot of Jewish communities going through an upheaval due to anti-Semitism in Europe, especially the United Kingdom and France. And right now, Portugal is not a perfect country, but it's earning a much-needed reputation as a country of respect to religious minorities. I know that, Portugal, like every country, has its issues with intolerance. But in conducting the research for this book, I learned the country is very well aware of its special Jewish history and understands the consequences that came from the Portuguese Inquisition. This may surprise some of you, but as many as 30% of the public here in Portugal believe they are descended from Jewish families, and that is a very large number. Many Portuguese families are now discovering their Jewish roots and understanding the unique traditions taught to them from their parents and grandparents. It could include understanding a ritual that their family observed during our holiday of Passover. It could be why their mothers and grandmothers light candles on Friday night. It could be why there's a tradition in the family of not eating pork. There are a lot of little traditions that have survived for centuries that people thought were normal, and only now they're discovering that perhaps they had Jewish ancestors going back hundreds of years. And I believe that this rediscovery is an important reason why Portugal is now a safer and tolerant place for Jewish people to live than other countries in Europe. And this is why I was interested in Portugal and its Jewish communities. There's something very unique going on here in this country. You have a term called anusim, of people who are rediscovering their Jewish faith, and you have the return to Portugal beginning in the mid-1800s, the mid-19th century when the Inquisition was over, of Jewish people whose great-grandparents came back from Morocco and Gibraltar, and they settled here. And now you've got Jewish people from around the world who are discovering Lisbon and Portugal as a safe, wonderful place to live, including its climate and its low crime. So this is the beginning of my answer to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I will come back to some of the points that you mentioned, but before that I wanted to ask André if there is something like a renewal also in the Lisbon landscape in terms of Jewish presence and Jewish people living here.
The question
is there a renewal? Are there more people? Are there...
Oh.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm always surprised with the microphone. Thank you all for being here. So, indeed, there is a Jewish renewal. I can feel it in our community. We are a very small Ashkenazi community that was about to die several years ago. And it was actually resurrected by the descendants of crypto-Jews that were aware of their origins and didn't allow the community to end. So there were very few Ashkenazim still present there. One gentleman would go to the synagogue every Shabbat to open the door to see if someone was coming for prayer, and no one was coming, so he would close the door because he was not very religious, and he would just go away. Some people that eventually gathered together, and they found that they were better received there in the Ashkenazi community than in the other Sephardic community that were more stricter, more tied to other traditions, and rightfully so. But what happened? It was just a handful of people, like 10 to 15 people, regularized it, but the community was always very small. And since the last years, since I would say since 2019, when I first approached the Ohel Yaakov Synagogue, we were, if we were 10 people in the room, it was a crowd, it was amazing. Okay, currently we are about 120 members. Many times we cannot fit everyone that wants to come in our tiny apartment that Josh already knows. And so we have a huge collection of that were left over by the last Ashkenazim that came here, many of them during the war as Jewish refugees. And we are there, and every Shabbat it's a feast. Many times, yesterday on Kabbalat Shabbat, it was 24 people there in a room that has seats for 20 people. So, and this was not the worst case. So there is, in fact, as Josh was saying, a true Jewish renewal in Portugal.
I want to say that as I have known you for nearly 5 years now, I have seen the membership of your synagogue grow. You now are at the point where on our holiest of holidays called Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Passover, you have to go to a hotel to hold services. That's always a good sign. Believe me, that is a good sign. And the Orthodox synagogue, Sha'arei Tikva, there are now more people who attend there than there are physical seats. That is a good sign. And up in Porto, there is a second synagogue that just opened up, and they're now, after 2 or 3 years, at 100 members. That's an incredible growth spurt for such a tiny community.
And actually, there are other things. There is a startup of a new Reform congregation in Porto, Community Amacom. They are being sponsored by the World Union of Progressive Judaism, and they are mostly of American expats, but other people, and they, as far as I know, they have about 80 to 90 members.
Yes.
So this it is in front of our eyes what is currently happening in Jewish in the Jewish world in Portugal.
Yeah. And I argue in the book that we have not seen this since before the Inquisition. Now, the numbers are much smaller, but you grew up here. Did you think there was going to be a time when there would be 2 synagogues in Porto, 2 synagogues in Lisbon, and a brand new synagogue in the Algarve, and an Orthodox synagogue in Cascais? That is extraordinary.
That's extraordinary, indeed.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And it is not stopping. And I still feel that we are not reaching everyone that we could. Many people eventually, we had some problems with the ceiling wind because of the hurricanes during this winter. And for a moment, Sha'arei Tikva, the SEAL community, they were amazing. They gave us a space for us to meet. As our community was in, we didn't have a ceiling because it collapsed during the hurricanes that happened in Portugal. And I managed to meet many people of the regulars that go to Sha'arei Tikva, and they were, there is a progressive community in Lisbon? How come I never heard of this? So many people, they don't know that we are here. They never heard of us. So I'm not here advertising for our community, of course. And let me be very frontal. I believe that still they have been the most vocal voice in Judaism in Portugal, and they have been doing an amazing work. I cannot but to praise what David and Marcos and José Roy and all of those people, what they are doing there. It's just amazing and many times unrecognized.
And any idea why this is happening now?
Well, I'll give you the academic, research, anthropologist, professor perspective, and then I'll turn it over to the real expert. There seems, it's very interesting. There seems to be 3 factors going on at one time now. You had up until this year the what was called the Sephardic nationality law. Both Spain and Portugal were trying to make amends for the Inquisition. The Inquisition is still, there's still effects today. And you don't necessarily see it, but you can feel it in some areas. So both Spain and Portugal, nearly 10 years ago, passed a law to try to make the amends. And here in Portugal specifically, you had Jewish people around the world who could show some kind of ancestry from Spain or Portugal. I was one of those, just to be clear. And we collectively applied... collectively applied for citizenship, and I did it here in Portugal because the first time I came to visit, I felt a kinship. I felt a real kinship, and that's why I now consider Portugal as my second home. But you've got that going on, so you've got the Jewish people from all over the world of this Sephardic ancestry from Spain and Portugal who have applied for citizenship. Most have not moved here, but they are coming a lot as tourists. Some have moved here, so you've got that. Then you've got the growing anti-Semitism, especially in France. There's a large number of French Jews who have moved across the country. At the same time, you've got Israelis who are moving here, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret that is not very well known, and feel free to disagree with me, okay? But not all Israelis want to live in Israel. I have been told, it's not in the book, off the record, but privately I've been told that Israel is a very noisy country, literally a noisy country, and a lot of people are tired of war. They want to raise their family in a peaceful place, and they want to be farmers. They want to be farmers. So a lot of them have moved to Alentejo to be farmers. So you've got those factors going on. And then at the same time, you've got these American expats who are moving to Lisbon and Porto, not by the tens, but probably by the hundreds. And that's why you have this more liberal synagogue, Hamakom, that is now at least 100 people. And your own synagogue, too. Every time I come see you, I'm meeting more and more Americans who either live here or live here part of the year now. So I see all those factors coming together.
Exactly. No, you are absolutely right. And even I have a little house in my, I'm from the Beiras, and many times I go to supermarkets. Of course, everyone goes to supermarkets, but it's many times I'm there and suddenly I hear a familiar accent. And it's Israelis, and I start talking to them. And yeah, we started living here. It is important to know that in the foundation of Israel, many people that went to the kibbutzim, to the kibbutz over there, they were not religious. They were very, very left-wing. Actually, Israel was founded by very left-wing communist type of people. And it's extraordinary what they did there, and still that left-wing point of view is there, and many people currently are leaving the kibbutzim because they do not see themselves in current Israeli politics. And so they are coming what looks like Israel, but it's peaceful and, yeah, kind of... And no war, and people are nice. Well, it's Portugal. Come on, of course it's Portugal. And let me tell you another thing. I don't know if Josh knows this. There is an amazing book about the history of Portuguese Jews by Karsten Wilke. And one of the things that you can see of people in the 18th century, in the 17th centuries, people that left Portugal, and when they were meeting themselves and see, they were missing home, and they were saying, oh, there is no place like home, not like Dorothy in asking for Kansas, but missing Portugal, not Jerusalem. They were missing Portugal. And they felt very much like Portuguese Jews. And this is why the largest synagogue in Amsterdam is the Portuguese synagogue. One of, if not the oldest synagogue in the US, is the Portuguese synagogue.
Yeah. No, I agree. In fact, one thing that, I think it's important for people to understand, Peter, is during the Inquisition, when the Jewish people in Portugal escaped, they wanted to come back. That's why they were nearby in Morocco, Gibraltar, Algeria, Libya. They were waiting to come home. And so many Jews who I have met whose great-grandparents came back in the 1850s, their families were like, Portugal is our home. And that's why they came back very quickly. They didn't want to leave. They were forced to leave. They kept the traditions. They kept the stories of Portugal through the generations, which is an extraordinary thing to do. You know, when my mother was alive, she and I had a very interesting conversation because my great-grandparents immigrated to the United States in the early 1900s. And I said to my mom, I am the 5th generation American. My daughter is the 6th generation American. And we keep certain stories going on. Now, how would we do this for 300 or 400 years? And my mom looked at me and said, I don't know. And I said, I don't know either. We've been able to keep it for 6 generations about family traditions. But these Portuguese Jews did it for 400 years. And when the time came to come home, they looked at Portugal as their home. They did not go to Israel. They did not go to the United States. They took their opportunity and left North Africa and came home.
The subtitle of your book is Identity, Memory and Return. And it's related to what you have been saying now. And I think I see the situation that you were describing in 2 forms. One is those who left Portugal or had to leave Portugal and kept certain Portuguese traditions and a certain, well, why not say saudade in relation to their country and their home. But on the other hand, we have the so-called new Christians in Portugal who also keep certain traditions alive and keep a memory alive, though not publicly to be admitted.
And I'm going to talk about that more as an academic and anthropologist and then turn it over to the expert. But that's the thing about the Jewish religion. Here or overseas, we are religiously a very stubborn people who cling on to our beliefs. And what was going on during the Inquisition is it was very difficult as a new Christian to maintain those traditions. But in the northeast corner of the country, in a little town I'm sure many of you have heard of, Belmonte, they did it. They pulled off, and it's literally written in the book, a miracle. They pulled a miracle where they lived their lives as new Christians. Outwardly, they were Catholic. But in this little city, this little town of Belmonte in nearby towns, they all knew who they were, and they married within each other. And they kept the traditions, and unfortunately, the religion evolved into a way that modern-day Judaism of the early 20th century did not recognize. But there was enough of those strands left where there was no question these people were Jewish. And now I'm going to let André talk about that, because you have, I believe, a very personal connection to that.
Of course. Yes, the story of the new Christians, of the Bnei Anusim, that are in the inception of the renewal of our own community. There are many stories. Many people, they have these weird things. Why did my grandmother light candles on Shabbat, on Friday evenings? And they didn't know why. Why people, they didn't, pork was not in their diet. Some people even developed like allergies to pork and seafood. And, or so they say, they could not eat it. And so many things, like something like, this also in my family, washing hands before meals. For instance, my great-grandmother, she was so staunch in not letting anyone entering the dining room with their hands not washed, that she managed to install a washing basin in front of the dining room, so that everyone, you would notice the washing basin, and it would be crazy if I didn't wash my hands going there. So these are, how can I say, shadows. But there are shadows of a distant past. But there is another thing. Actually, I've come to, as I met many families with different stories, with different memories, I came to see that there are in many families 3 signs that actually I would like to tell them that like they are almost indicative of a Jewish past and very present family roots. The first thing is a knowledge of an origin. Their Jewishness is never lost, even if the family, they are already Christians, because of the milieu, because everyone in the village, we were Jewish. Something that is not worn proudly, but it is known. The second sign, it is quite interesting, is, and you will see this in other places, but the three of them I would say that are mostly unmistakable. A very strong connection to an extended family. The family is not just the mother, the father, and it's the mother, the father, the aunts, the uncles, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, everyone together is part of the family. It's my family is a clan, okay? Sometimes I don't know all their names, but yeah, it's like that. And the third signal, education. You think about that in the beginning of the 20th century, only about 10% of people in Portugal knew how to read. When you find people that were educated, that knew how to read, and so on, all these three signs are almost definitely there is Jewish, deep Jewish roots inside.
So one of the stories that I want to share is from the recent rabbi of the Orthodox synagogue here in Lisbon. He came here and he moved here from South Africa, and he was here for several years. And the one thing that he was not expecting, but you're more familiar with, is he would have these people who literally would show up at the synagogue and tell him about these family traditions like you talked about. And then they'd say, "Am I Jewish?" And he's like, "I don't know, but you could be. Go back home and get me your family tree." So they would go home, get the family tree, and they'd say, "Now am I Jewish?" And he'd say, "Well, being Jewish is not easy, but this is the path you have to take." And some would say, "Okay, I want to stay Catholic, but thank you for telling me that I might be Jewish." And they'd went home. And then others would say, I want to come to your synagogue. So he had an open invitation for them to come every Saturday, which is our Shabbat, our Sabbath. And so they would, and some would begin the conversion process, and others would not, and they remain Catholic. But what he told me that parallels what you said is the Portuguese people want to know who they are. There is an interesting dynamic here in this country of everyone wanting to know where they come from and who their ancestors are. And what they choose to do with that information is up to them, but there's this wanting to know. And that was one of the most impressive things he told me about living here. And what you just said parallels that perfectly.
I really think that one of the most fascinating stories in your book is exactly that one, how these practices and rituals survive over time, even in families who are no longer explicitly aware of their origins, but maintain it as a tradition for their family. And this over centuries. And that might have led also to the situation that you described, because when you were describing this three signs of Jewishness for someone not being Portuguese by origin, I would say many of this is also very Portuguese, right? So that there are actually similar constellations which characterize a certain kind of being a Portuguese and a certain kind of being a Jew.
Yeah, no, I would agree. There was a former rabbi, Rabbi Salas, who served up in Belmonte, and without him, I would not have been able to do the research for that chapter. And he was telling me just how faithful they all are to their past. And how they kept it going. And I asked him, "Do you believe this was a miracle by God?" And his answer was, absolutely. You don't just survive and maintain for 500 years. That is extraordinary. 5 centuries is something that it's hard for any of us to wrap our heads around. But they maintained in some way their origins. And yes, their religious beliefs may have gone down a path that differed from how the rest of Judaism was evolving. But 500 years, show me many other groups who can do that for 500 years.
I don't know if I'm allowed to do this here. Sometimes when we have visitors in our synagogue, I tell them this, I think it's, let me show you, let me see if I can do it. Imagine that you have a garden full of here and there some flowers running in the garden, and then buckets of turf, terra, buckets of turf killing the flowers. This is the Inquisition. But then in one place and another, some little flowers are sprouting, less than the initial ones. And then another bucket of turf, more persecutions. And now do this for 15 times, 15 generations. And then suddenly, only in the most remote corners of the garden, there are flowers sprouting. Many people have lost their origins. Many people have lost they just have shadows. And I like to think of myself as one of those little flowers that have sprouted in Belmonte. But there are other places, in Caria, in Carção, in Bragança, other places. Belmonte is absolutely amazing what they've managed to do. But it's authentically a miracle. I believe there are no explanation, no other parts in the world where this has happened. But just you were saying one thing very important, that you said about 30% there are these estimates. Actually, before coming here, I was looking at genetic Ashkenazi presence in Portugal. It's higher than in Spain, much higher than in France, much higher than the UK, much higher than in Germany.
I didn't know that.
Does it make any sense? And we are not Ashkenazi. Okay? There was a period in our history after the expulsion of Jews from Spain that about 15% of the Portuguese population was Jewish. About 1 million Portuguese people, and of those 150,000 were Jewish. Of course their values are within us, because we are them. And this is why Jews feel at home here, because we are them. It's within our DNA.
Yeah. Let me just clarify what he's saying in case you're not sure. Ashkenazi Jews are those Jews who are typically from Central and Eastern Europe. Sephardic Jews are those who are from Portugal, Spain, and North Africa. And that's all you need. That's all you need to know for right now. We can even break it down further, but we're not going to. But nonetheless, what you are saying is somewhere along the way, a large number of Central and Eastern European Jews came here at some point.
No, it's actually more interesting.
Yeah.
It was the Portuguese Jews
who
that left to Amsterdam,
right.
crossed over.
Right.
So this is why when I was looking at my DNA and I was looking, look at the amount of Ashkenazi cousins that I have.
Yeah. I mean, the Inquisition did, as you called the Inquisition, turf. It was very... it was a lot of turf. The Inquisition was very good at what it did, unfortunately, but was not perfect. And the Inquisition led us to the first Jewish communities in the Americas. It led us to a lot of pirates who were Jewish, who made it their mission to attack the Spanish and Portuguese vessels.
That I didn't know.
Yeah. We'll talk about that at dinner. There were a lot of Jewish pirates in the Caribbean who wanted revenge. And then Amsterdam and London, their Jewish communities were rebuilt because of the Inquisition. The Ottoman Empire became an empire because of the Inquisition. And what I argue in the book is, while the Inquisition was completely horrible, Portugal and Spain made a big mistake. Not just because you tell the Jewish people to convert or die, but because you took your empires and weakened them, and you allowed the British, the Dutch, and the Turks to build these amazing empires. And then you had these pirates in the Americas attacking your ships, plundering it of gold for nothing more than revenge. I don't blame them. But You know, I mean, it was a serious miscalculation on their part. And that turf was very efficient at what it did. The Jewish communities in Porto were gone. In Lisbon, they were gone. In the Algarve, they were gone. But in northwest Portugal, along the Spanish border, the towns were small enough where they could sneak by and start to sprout. Like you said, they started to sprout.
Josh,
And they're still sprouting.
yes, just let me. I was talking, and I'm going to talk about something that is so tenuous that I cannot even describe it. In the hometown of my great grandmother, where I have this house that I'm rebuilding, we entered into the main cafe in the central cafe in that little village. As we were entering, actually it was my wife. She looked at the left and she saw there was one wall, and with one like not a painting, like a picture on the wall. And what was that picture? A Sefer Torah. A Sephardic roll of the Torah. And the owner is not Jewish. He doesn't know anything about Judaism. And I actually asked him, why, but he's a local one, why did you put this on the wall? I don't know. I saw it and it looked pretty, and I made a frame out of it. So it is subconscious. It's not no longer even present in the memory. It's there.
And that's your shadow.
Yes, that's the shadows that are still here.
Yeah, and that's to call it a shadow is one image, and a very impressive image. The other image that you were presenting is of the turf and the flowers which are coming in spite of the attempts to kill them all. This is really an impressive story, and it depends on whether you look at the Inquisition from the standpoint of its 100% attempt and its 90% success. Well, but I would just like to understand another aspect about the organization of Jewish communities. Well, I am from the Catholic University, as you know. We have a very easy, understandable structure at our church, which is very hierarchical, and there is a hierarchy telling us where to go. May I think that the renewal of Jewish life is also thanks to the not existence of such an instance that tells you, a hierarchy that tells you what is the right way to be Jewish.
So there is a joke in the United States that we only say amongst each other as Jewish people. When there are two Jews in a room, you're going to get three opinions. So you may have two more opinions after what I'm going to say, okay? Here in Portugal, there doesn't seem to be a hierarchy. And in the concluding chapter, I wouldn't say I'm advocating for a hierarchy, but I'm recommending it. I'm recommending a hierarchy because the population is growing, and unity is, especially now, very, very important. So it seems, Peter, that here in Portugal, each city where there's a Jewish population, it does its own thing. They know each other, but they're not necessarily very close. And then, I've got to be very careful about what I'm going to say here, but there is a rift between the community in Porto and a community in Lisbon. And now, as an academic, I am saying, and I am going on the record, that they need to come and make peace, because the anti-Semitic threat is larger than them each individually. And they have got to come to a way to come together, because unity, as you and I have talked about, unity is very, very important, especially now. But there is no central hierarchy. It's not like the Catholic Church. There is the central rabbinate, the rabbis in Israel who make a lot of declarations, and it's followed in Israel and in many communities around the country, around the world. But then a lot of Jews like to say, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. We That's why we say two Jewish people in a room give you three opinions. And we're very independent, very spirited people. But I would say right now there isn't really a lot of what Peter's talking about, a lot of structure and authority. People know each other across the country, but I think, would you agree, Azriel, that there needs to be something that needs to go on in order to bring people closer together hierarchically?
I definitely. And this has been, actually, when I started being president of Ohel Yaakov Synagogue, one of my major goals was to start to make amends with the other community, with the Sephardic ones. There were people, there is stubborn people everywhere. And indeed, there were poor things that were done on both sides. And it was my goal to see that we are talking again. And we are. And we are, and this has been beneficial, I would say, even for SIL. And I think there is a lot of room for continuous improvement. I think that the issues with Porto need to be mended. And it's fundamental that Portuguese Jews, not that they speak in one voice, because that will never happen. Never. But because Jews have never spoken in one single voice anywhere, and so that is not going to change.
No.
Not since Moses.
They can't even agree on how to keep kosher.
Of course not. But we could. There are some ground truths, because I always say that the things that unite us are much larger than the things that separate us. So we need to talk. Let's see, what do we agree upon? What can we think about? And eventually with the support, possibly of other institutions, who knows, from the Catholic Church, who knows, from the Embassy of Israel, that we could start slowly going that way.
One model that I talk about in the book that is an American model, the Canadians use it, the Romanians use it, the Bulgarians use it, and a few other countries, is it's called a federation. It's not a religious model. It's more of a economic, sociological model where the different synagogues, and it doesn't matter if they're on the liberal end or very orthodox end, they all raise money together and individually, and then there's enough money to share so that children can go to camps, so that children can go to a Jewish school to learn, to help elderly people who might need health care or might need food. So there is a model that is in practice that is successful. But as far as a religious model, it'll never happen. And I'm not sure, if you look back at Judaism going back to ancient times, we always fought with each other. But he's right. You know, here in Portugal, we've got to come together and say what are the basics, because the dangers that are facing us cannot be fought without some sort of unity. It's really that simple.
So it is clear that you would not say the flowers that are coming should all be tulips or roses, but they could be any flower, like flourishing is what is pretended to happen. But you can agree on one thing, that the turf was trying to kill all the flowers, and that from this turf experience, to call it like this, there might be also a view of the future and how to go together. And I think we reached a point where we also have to close up, and maybe a last round of the 3 or 4 opinions that you have in relation to what comes next in terms of this. Where are we going as in the renewal of Jewish community in Portugal?
Where are we going? That's the most difficult thing. First, we have a lot of obstacles. The war in Israel is making people sometimes very extremists. We are seeing things in Portugal that we have never seen. Things that we thought it was from a forgotten past, but it is not. We are seeing graffitis on the walls. It is not free Palestine or something like that. It is expel the Jews. And this is a completely different thing. It is totally racist. It is totally xenophobic, and this cannot be held. So I think we are on crossroads. But if you allow me just 15 seconds more, there is one thing. We Jews, we were always persecuted. There was a brief period where we could breathe and say, oh, the horrors of the Shoah, of the Nazism, of the concentration camps, of the Holocaust, they were horrible. Now people will say, oh, we are not so bad. But no, this is as it always was. So I'm afraid that this hatred is not something that is new, but is something that was sleeping. And my fear is that things are going to become as they always were. As they were never since I was born, but I can see the dread that my forefathers passed through. And again, this is how things were. And this is the thing that why we need to be together.
I would say, as an outsider looking in, there are so many more positive things potentially for the future than negative. André is absolutely correct that we should not be seeing signs in Kashkaish of expel the Jews. There should not be graffiti, but this is an opportunity not only for the Jewish community to unite, but we know for a fact that the government of Portugal, the city government of Lisbon, the city government of Porto and Belmonte, and the city governments in the Algarve are very supportive of their Jewish people. They have of their citizens. They have gone on record. Now they need to continue to go on record. And what we have found in the United States, because let me tell you, we're going through a wave of anti-Semitism in the United States that I've never seen in my 52 years of living. And it's when non-Jews are by our side and say, you're not going to do this. Enough is enough. And I would encourage, and I know there are interfaith councils across Portugal, and from what I've been told, there really are not disputes among the religions here. This is more of a political dispute. And what people don't realize is not everybody supports what Israel does. Some people do, some people don't, and then some people have very mixed feelings. But Portugal is in a special place, and the city of Lisbon is in a special place where we can say, no, not here. This is not going to happen here. We are better than this. And it should be done, and I am hopeful it will be done. Because in the United States, we don't have that. It's very sporadic what's going on in the United States, and it's very sad. But here is the opportunity to be the country in Europe, across the continent, where we say, no, it is not going to happen, and the president of the country, the prime minister of the country, the mayor of the cities stand shoulder to shoulder. They've done a very good job with that over the years. They just need to be more vocal about it. And for, the other religious minorities across this country, because this is a beautiful country of religious minorities, to say, no, this isn't going to happen, because what we have learned through centuries of persecution is when they come for the Jews, they don't stop there. They go for everybody else. And Portugal is in a unique position to say, no, this is not going on here. So that's how I would say if we're at the crossroads, but I am personally more optimistic than pessimistic.
Josh and André, thank you very much for sharing this experience. This was a great lesson. And if you want to know more about it, please buy the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for a wonderful debate. Just to say that the book is, I will say in Portuguese, o autor vai estar a dar autógrafos no nosso pavilhão, que é no D33, é mesmo aqui perto, e logo de seguida podem, de facto, conversar com o autor se pretenderem colocar alguma pergunta. Muito obrigada a todos. Obrigada.